Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Ann, and I'm with the Arizona Statewide Independent Living Council. And today I want to get started with a course on emergency preparedness during COVID-19. And I do want to go a few things over with you, just the agenda and the meeting today. And just give me 1 second. I want to change one thing on my screen just because it's a little distracting, and I'll get to you. Okay, perfect. So as you might notice today, we have closed captioning, and I'm really excited about that. So thank you, Carla, for joining us. I just had to turn it off on my own screen because watching my words, it's a little distracting as I talk. So today you're looking at our slide, the Arizona Statewide Independent Living Council, and we get to present this information today thanks to our Public Health Department. The Arizona Department of Health Services actually contracts with us to present emergency preparedness information for individuals who have disabilities. So our agenda for today. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the Zoom platform itself and how to make the most of your Zoom learning experience. Then we're going to talk about what is COVID-19 and how did it start. What steps can you take to prevent COVID-19? How and why you should create an evacuation plan. How do you create an emergency communication plan? How do you create an emergency supply kit? Where can you find more resources? And how to advocate during COVID-19. So with Zoom, you are able to call in or be able to view through the computer or your smartphone. So therefore, some people are able to view our slides and others cannot. As a result, I will make sure to read all the content on the slides, so you're not missing out on anything if you do have to call in. Sometimes people will have technical issues. It's really common to have an audio output issue, so you might need to change what device you're watching the Zoom on. So that's just a little bit of troubleshooting if you run into any trouble. If you're able to during the session, if you do run into trouble, you can chat through the Zoom platform, or you could send me an email because I will be monitoring that. Okay, and for those who are using closed captions, you can also change the size of those closed captions. You'll just need to do so in your Zoom settings. Oh, and I skipped ahead on my slide a little bit. So the closed captions for today's presentations are available. And as we said, to access the captions, look for the menu on the bottom of the Zoom screen and click the CC button. And then you can change the size of the captions in the Zoom preferences. Phone or online. To make this presentation accessible by phone, we will read out loud all presentation slides. We'll use only a couple of images, and we will describe those out loud for anyone unable to view the slides. And as we said, there are some common troubleshooting issues. Common problems when first using the Zoom platform can be the audio output and your computer volume. We are recording this Zoom session today, and we will send a link to the recording to anyone who registered for this session. If you encounter problems with your audio during the session, you can test your speakers in the Zoom preference under audio. If this does not work, you could try accessing the session with a different device, such as calling into the session with your cell phone. Okay, now to give you a bit of background, we have taught emergency preparedness at AZ Silk for almost a decade. But for myself, I only began in 2017. And it has been interesting to see how content has to be changed due to this new coronavirus. So this coronavirus only started last year. The first reported cases were December 31st, 2019, and that's when the Chinese authorities informed the World Health Organization, China's office, of pneumonia cases in Wuhan City in China, and it said with an unknown cause. So when the virus actually started, we don't have an exact date, but sometime between November and December of 2019. In January 7th of 2020, COVID-19 was identified. China identifies new coronavirus as cause of the pneumonia outbreak. January 21st, 2020, human-to-human transmission. WHO, the World Health Organization, confirms human-to-human transmission of the virus. January 20, 2020, the first US case. The first recorded US case was an American citizen traveling from Wuhan, China, to his home state in Washington. And as you are probably aware, since we are doing social distancing across the nation, we soon had cases flare up in New York, especially Washington State, and we have been fortunate in Arizona not to have very high amount of cases comparatively. But all of us across the nation have made changes to prevent these cases. So I'm going to go into that a little bit more. Okay, where did COVID-19 come from? It is uncertain. There are several theories, but none of them have been widely accepted. The most prevalent theory is that in the late 2019, someone at the Hunan seafood market in Wuhan was affected with COVID-19 from an animal at the market, possibly a bat. These are live seafood markets, and sometimes they have other animals, including bats that they're selling live. And the nature of having one animal live next to another animal live is that the virus can easily mutate by transmitting from one animal to another. So these markets are kind of known for being a bit more risky. However, less than 300 yards from this market is the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Therefore, another theory has been an accidental leak from the Institute. But I did look into this before our connection today, and I haven't found any evidence to support this theory. However, I did want to bring it up because I believe it was Senator Cotton, Representative Cotton, excuse me, who is from Arizona, who actually talked about this theory in Congress in session. And I would like to say that, you know, it would be similar to us in United States if we had a new virus that happened in Atlanta, Georgia. You know, the location by itself is going to make some people suspicious. And so it makes sense that some people look into this. However, there really hasn't been any evidence to back this up. In fact, that we've seen more evidence on the other side, like the similarities between this coronavirus and previous coronaviruses. So just something I want to address, that we don't know exactly where this came from. And it will be very important into the future because they develop viruses based on the genetic sequences of them. Oh, sorry, just develop vaccines based on the genetic sequences of viruses. And so our scientists will be researching this, and I'm sure we're going to find an answer. And so just like I said, I was monitoring my email just to make sure no one had any trouble. So let me give that a quick check. Perfect. There we go. Okay. So what is COVID-19? It is a respiratory illness. The most common symptoms include the shortness of breath, fever, and coughing. There has been other symptoms associated with it. There has been a loss, a sensation of smell and taste that reported by a lot of people. There has been nausea reported, but the most common symptoms are the shortness of breath, fever, and coughing. How is it spread? It's spread through respiratory droplets. These droplets are produced by coughing, sneezing, or talking, and you catch the virus by breathing in the droplets produced by someone who has the virus, or if you touch a surface that these droplets are on and then touch your mouth, nose, or eyes. Reproductive number. Now this is a new term, even for myself. I only knew it as transmission rate. but this is the official language for a virus, and it means the number of new cases stemming from each COVID-19 infection. And that is, if I was to get sick, how many people would I transmit that virus to? Currently, it has a range from 2.2 to 6.5. So that means we really don't know. The transmission rate is high. Anything above a 1 is high because we don't want to transmit that to even one new person. But we should be able to narrow down those rates as we understand this virus more. Illness outcomes. Country-specific fatality rates vary from 0.5 to 3.6%, compared to seasonal flu, which is typically 0.1% in the United States. So these percentages are definitely scary high for public health officials. You know, when you're talking about everyone potentially getting sick, the 0.5% still can add up to a lot of people. And unfortunately, with this virus, the people most affected by it are people with chronic conditions. So people who have diabetes, people who have asthma, people who have use steroids, have an immune condition. We're definitely the most vulnerable to not only getting the infection, but our outcomes. So whether the chances are that we need the ventilator. And because of that, we need to protect ourselves more than the rest of the population. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. So let me just double check my presentation. Okay. Preventing the spread of COVID-19. Avoiding exposure is the only sure way to prevent COVID-19. This is very important because this is why we're doing social distancing. If I don't come in contact with anyone who is sick, I am protected from COVID-19. Anytime I have any contact with someone, I have an increased risk of that exposure because they could be sick and not know it. So actually, I do want to address one other thing. Going back to the previous slide, when we talk about the reproductive number, this is the number of new cases stemming from each COVID-19 infection. This number is also very high because people can remain without symptoms after exposure for 2 to 14 days. This is far higher than the seasonal flu, which is like 2 to 3 days. This will cause people to believe that they are not sick, they do not feel sick, and they will go out maybe to the grocery store and conduct business as usual and inadvertently be spreading this virus as they go. This makes the reproductive number much higher and the danger of COVID-19 much higher. And it is the reason why we have certain other preventive measures. So when we are preventing the spread of COVID-19, hand washing and disinfecting are the most important. And I think we all kind of assume that we know what these things mean. You know, we've washed our hands since we were children, but you know, even myself, your hands should be washed with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. So since this happens, I am literally counting in my head as I wash my hands to make sure I get those full 20 seconds. It's something I just recommend everyone doing, just because it's easy to be in a hurry during your day and try to be a little short on it. So just make sure you do it for your full 20 seconds. You also want to wash your hands often. So traditionally, we would wash our hands maybe before we eat or before we cooked, after we used the restroom. But now we want to wash our hands a bit more. So for myself, I've started washing my hands anytime I've left anywhere. If I've arrived home from the grocery store or the doctor's, I wash my hands. If I handle a package, after I'm done opening the package, I wash my hands. These are things I just didn't have to think about before COVID-19. And now it's just an unfortunate reality is that we have to just be more careful. The commonly touched surfaces should be cleaned and disinfected daily. So cleaning and disinfecting are slightly different things. So cleaning is getting the surface dirt off, but disinfecting is getting those virus, the actual virus off the surface. So with COVID-19, it can actually live on surfaces for a significant period of time. I've seen anywhere from 24 hours to 6 days, depending on the type of surface. So it's more important than ever to practice cleaning and disinfecting things like your door handles. You touch those all the time and you don't think about it, even your car door handles. People who use durable medical equipment, we have, for myself, I have a nerve stimulator implant, so I have like a device that controls this implant, and so I need to make sure I'm cleaning that device. People who are using wheelchairs, you now need to be worried about, cleaning more your wheels and your handles and anything that you're touching more. With face masks, I'm actually going to turn this slide off because I do want to show you the face masks I have. So stop share. There we go. Hello, everyone. Since this happened, I've purchased a few masks. So let's talk about the quality of these. This one is there you can see it. It's an N95 mask. And for those who can't see the screen, it is a thicker white mask, more industrial looking. You would picture it on a painter. And then this mask has like a little nose clip on the top, so you always know how to put it on. And then, and I'll describe what I'm doing as best as I can, but putting on the mask, I'll have to describe a little bit afterwards. But for those who can see me, I'm putting the nose clip on where my nose is, adjusting my glasses. Okay, so you first put it over your mouth, and then put one strap over your head, and then the second strap over your head. And this gives you a lot of security. What you're trying for is to make sure the seal is on your face. So if you do have facial hair, it can affect the seal, but I wouldn't worry about it if it's just a little bit. If you do have significant facial hair though, you might consider actually even shaving just during this time period. Now, for me, you'll hear that you shouldn't have N95 masks. We have a very large shortage in our nation right now on N95 masks. It needs to be a high priority for our healthcare providers to be able to stay safe so they can treat us. And so therefore, it isn't a priority to get everyone in the public N95 masks until we can get our providers them. And so they discourage people in public health from buying the N95 masks. However, there's a lot of people who, like myself, actually had them as part of our emergency preparedness supplies in advance. And if you have them, you should be using them. There's also a lot of people who had these masks for DIY stuff in their house. They are very effective for molds. And so if you do have some of these in your garage, I would really encourage using the N95 masks. They just have a proven success rate, whereas our cloth masks, we just don't know the difference yet scientifically between our N95 mask effectiveness and our cloth mask effectiveness. So I'm going to show you some different versions of cloth masks. This one is also considered graded in N95 masks, and that's because it has this filter. It has a carbon filter that actually goes into a cloth mask. And then I also have just a cloth mask, and that is what majority of people you'll see wearing now. I did purchase a cloth mask myself that had a pocket for a filter. And just to demonstrate what you don't want on your mask, this one is far too big for me. So if I can do this and talk to you with the mask, it's probably not a good fit. You just want to make sure you have that seal around your mouth. I witnessed some store employees that had their mask below their nose. Unfortunately, this is really offering you very little protection. You're going to be breathing a lot through your nose. You're going to be exposed that way. And so I definitely would recommend wearing them on completely. However, there are a few people who have respiratory issues already. You know, my mother has asthma and cannot wear one of those masks. It just makes breathing too difficult. And so if you see someone not wearing a mask, I wouldn't assume that they have chosen not to wear it because they don't agree. They might just have an issue that you don't see and why they can't wear the mask. So I'm going to switch back over to my slides and do the little email check. Perfect. Okay. So what I have on this slide, cloth masks are recommended anytime you cannot maintain social distancing. Masks are not just for when you are sick. So previously, we have recommended in public health to wear a mask if you are sick. But in light of COVID-19, this recommendation has changed. It's because of that time period where you get sick before you start experiencing symptoms. Those 2 to 14 days, you can spread the virus a lot. And so if we have everyone who doesn't have symptoms all wear masks, we are preventing those people who don't know yet they're sick from spreading the illness. There is also other PPE, and that stands for personal protective equipment. This includes things like gloves. It will also include eyewear, and you'll see some healthcare professionals wear face masks. You can get the virus through your eyes. So really, for most people, this is why you should wash your hands, because you don't want to rub your eyes or touch your mouth when you potentially have the virus on your hands still. When you are actually dealing with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19, you might step up those precautions. So, you know, for a lot of healthcare professionals, they're wearing the N95 masks, but they're also wearing goggles or the face shields. And this will prevent not only themselves from touching their eyes accidentally, but also inadvertently contact with your eyes. So it's something just to be aware of, because we could be taking care of a family member with COVID-19, and we might want to increase our protection in those circumstances. So even wearing glasses is actually a form of protection. I don't think this is necessary for going to the grocery store. I myself am not using goggles going to the grocery store. I don't see that recommended anywhere, but just something to be aware of in case you are in a situation that you think your exposure is higher than normal. Okay. Normally, when we taught emergency preparedness, we even had a class just in December 2019, and this was before COVID-19, and it's amazing how some of our instructions have changed in light of this. So we are going to discuss now the 3 types of evacuations to consider in your own personal emergency planning. And that is a quick evacuation from your home, an evacuation from your home area, or an evacuation from a public place. You might need to quickly evacuate your home in case of a house fire. You smell smoke, it's late at night, you instantly run out the door with your family. In this situation, you need to consider the quickest and easiest path to the exits, and keep this path clear at all times. So when you are, hopefully later today, thinking about your own personal emergency planning, I would like you to consider your own home layout and how you could quickly navigate to the exits, especially in places that you know you spend a lot of time, such as in bed. And then spend extra effort to keep things off of this area. You know, you might have this area blocked off during a certain period of time, like with a kitchen table, where you have those extenders. You might suddenly be blocking off a path. You know, I just want you to be more aware that this blocking off paths could be more risky if there was an emergency. Something that might just seem like an inconvenience, you have to walk around another way, in an event of a house fire might actually be very dangerous. So you try to keep your paths clear to the exits. A lot of emergency guides that you'll see online even have like grids where you could draw out your home layout and draw a path from your bed to the nearest exit. For myself, my drawing skills are not very good. So for me, it was much better just to walk through the exit myself and the path myself to the exit. So from evacuation from your home area, this is something like a wildfire. And you might have noticed, like you got a notification on your phone. You now know that you have a very short period of time to leave. However, this is a longer period of time than maybe a house fire. You can consider things like what supplies do you need from your home. These are different from everyone, and you'll see tons of checklists online. And you know, if you want examples, I think they're great. I think you need to create one for yourself, though. There are just things that no one else can consider for you. So for me, I have to take medication on a very regular schedule. So for me, in this checklist of things I need to take with me, medication is a very high priority. Whereas, you know, important documents for me is not a high priority because, as we'll discuss a little later, I have those in cloud storage, so I don't need to worry about that as part of an evacuation item. Evacuating from a public place. This is like a fire in a public building, or scary to think about, an active shooter situation. In this situation, you need to ask yourself if you are capable of leaving the building on your own, and try to avoid places that are not accessible. So even with people who are not in mobility devices, we might sometimes go into a store which was very difficult to navigate through the aisles, a big store, we don't know where the exits are. In that situation, it might become dangerous if there was to be a fire or a shooter. It is especially dangerous if you are in a position where you need assistance. So as you enter a building, I want you to consider how you will get out. So at a hotel, for example, when you go to your registration, they often will even have a check mark on a form you fill out that will say, like, do you need assistance evacuating? If you do need assistance, make sure you check that or communicate with hotel staff that you will need assistance in an emergency. You know, if there isn't an elevator on that building and you are able to walk up the stairs, but maybe badly, try to not visit that building and put yourself in that position where you might need assistance from others without that preparation. Oh, I do see something on the Zoom, so let me check this. Okay, perfect. I do want to read this comment, so just to make sure I get the information when we need it, so give me just a moment doing this live. Yes, Catherine, you are very right. The N95s are considered respirators, and you should check with your medical professionals if you're having any breathing issues. You know, the N95 masks used to just be sold at Home Depot. So I wouldn't feel like you need to check just to use it. in a normal circumstance. If you know that you have breathing issues, if you have felt any concerns while wearing the mask, then definitely check with your medical provider. Oh, and I'm so relieved to read that the shortage is getting better. And yes, definitely cloth or medical masks are perfect for going out in public or routine trips. This is definitely good advice. Consider reserving or wearing any N95s when you go out to places where ill persons may be present, such as medical appointments. Absolutely fantastic, Catherine. You know, I do think I have a quick moment for a story with evacuations from public places. You know, sometimes it can seem daunting. I don't like to give examples of conditions that aren't my own. You know, I feel uncomfortable guessing what someone's difficulties might be. For myself, though, I feel a little more free using myself as an example. And so I have a condition called Addison's disease, and I do not make cortisol, so I cannot react to stress, good or bad stress, in a good way. I need to take medicine anytime there's a stressful circumstance. So in that situation where there's a fire or a shooter, I'm actually already in a dangerous situation just by the stress that caused. So I was very concerned that I would exit building and then have my medical condition trigger and pass out outside without any of my belongings because I just exited the building in an emergency. So I wouldn't have my medication. I wouldn't have an alert card or anything to let someone know what was wrong with me. So for me, I thought about that circumstance long and hard, and I bought the funniest emergency preparedness items you would think of. Necklaces and shoes. I got to go shopping, and I bought necklaces that contained little openings, and I was able to put my medication in there. And then with my shoes, I also bought shoes with little pockets, and I was able to put my medication in there. And then I felt more safe that in that emergency and I run out the door, I'm running out the door with that medication. So I'm able to aid myself as soon as I exit the building. Oh, and someone asked a great question. So in that circumstance, I'm now able to protect myself. I was also concerned to the risk I would put other people in. If I was in that circumstance where there's an active shooter, I might still risk myself to get my purse because my medication is in my purse, and somebody might try to save me from that action. And so I felt like I could endanger somebody else. I could endanger a first responder. And so by taking care of myself and my needs in advance, that really only myself is capable of knowing, only I would know about these medical needs, I was able to protect others. And so everyone's circumstance is different, especially if you are attending this with us at AZ Silk. It's probably because you are an individual who has a disability or has a loved one with a disability. And you really have to think about your household circumstance, your personal circumstance, and not just the overall. Someone else, a healthy person, might be okay just to run out the building and not have to take any precautions. Whereas other people, like myself, have to make some preemptive decisions in order to be safe in that same situation. So, should I wear my mask if I'm walking my dog around my neighborhood at night? This is a great question because it depends. If you are actually alone, you are walking down my neighborhood street, it's very quiet. I'm not going to likely run into anybody. So I could walk my dog around my neighborhood at night and feel safe. Now, there's been a lot more people out on the sidewalks because of social distancing, trying to get outside. And you want to maintain that 6-foot radius, but if you are exerting yourself, you're producing more respiratory droplets, and same with those around you. So if like you're biking you are producing respiratory droplets like mad, and all of those are getting blown behind you. So suddenly the 6-foot radius has to be 12 meters, it has to be extreme. So if I was you, I would probably carry my mask with me. Therefore, I would be able to put my mask on if I noticed I was going to run into a group of people, if I couldn't avoid, or if there's a lot of bikers, I could then put on my mask as needed. I unfortunately wouldn't recommend just going out without any protection, because of those respiratory droplets just really travel very far. And I wouldn't want any accidents to happen without me having my mask with me. Okay, now I'm going to talk about your emergency communication plan. This comes in 3 steps. This is first communicating with first responders, communicating with loved ones, and communicating with service providers. When you're communicating with first responders, you need to consider what information do the first responders need from you? How will you communicate this information quickly and as simply as possible? Consider carrying a card in your wallet that contains important information. So for myself, I don't have it right here with me, but I have a keychain instead of a card. And so it's for that circumstance where I'm in an emergency situation with my medical needs, and I need to communicate that with somebody. I might not be able to verbally communicate that with somebody. So I have a keychain that explains my condition and what's going on, and then I'm able to give that to somebody. I do want to make sure I'm talking about the comments too as we go. And we had a good one. If you are concerned you are coming too close with someone, try to walk on the other side when taking a walk. And that's absolutely great advice. Yeah, you can normally just navigate around people. You know, one of the best examples I've seen of communication cards is actually from the movie Joker. So it's not a good example of an individual with a disability because it's Joker, but he has, in the movie, I believe, Tourette's syndrome, and so he's laughing as a result. And so he has a communication card to give to people when this flares up, so people can know why he's laughing. You know, for a healthy person, a communication card is still really important. I would include things just like your blood type, your name and address, and an emergency contact. You can find a lot of examples of these online. I didn't want to pin you down to anyone. FEMA has an example communications card, but so do a lot of nonprofits. So if you have a particular illness that has a community, you know, there is more of a community around vision loss and blindness. And so you can find resources through those nonprofits engaged in that. And so if there's community built around any kind of health condition you have, I would go to there for more specific resources. Then communicating with loved ones. You might not be with your loved ones when an emergency happens. How will you get in touch with them? Consider having emergency phone numbers written down in case you do not have access to your cell phone or the battery is dead. Consider having a pre-arranged meeting place with members of your household nearby your home. So if I had to make an emergency evacuation from my home, I might not have evacuated the same place as my family members, say my husband. And so once I'm outside of the house and outside of danger, I would want to locate that person as fast as I could to know that they are also okay. In this situation, I'm not likely to have my cell phone with me. So it is best to have a predetermined meeting place nearby that you could go to. So this could be like a big oak tree in the front yard, or this could be the school across the street. I'm lucky, I have some family members just down the street. So for me, this is actually another house down the street. I'm just checking with comments. So consider your circumstance and a good prearranged meeting place for you. When I used to live at apartments, the mailbox was always a good meeting place. Okay, so another great question. So I do want to address this. So my sister has her best friend over a couple of times over the past few days. Her best friend and her family have been staying at home through all of this. So my parents have allowed it. We're all socially distanced in the house when she's here. Is it safe enough, or should I call my sister out of this reckless and risk her sassy teenage skirt? I love it. So for me, I have family members down the street who have remained socially distanced through all of this, and I feel safe having contact with them without the same social distancing requirements. So, you know, my risk when I see them is myself. So I wear a mask, and but I feel safe with them coming over to my house, touching my things, and not feeling like I have to, you know, clean up with Lysol everything that they touched. So if you have a close family friend who has also been maintaining social distancing very well, I would feel safe in that circumstance. Now, to give you another example, though, my family members who have been fantastic at social distancing feel safe with, but I have a family friend who would love to, you know, has been as safe as he could, but he's had to work. And so we don't allow this person, our family friend, even in our house right now. And that's because we consider him more of a risk having to work during the circumstances, you know, work outside the home. And you know, so if this person is someone who isn't, you know, isn't risky, but isn't really able to maintain social distancing well, I wouldn't meet them right now. Things are changing very fast, and the only reason I could give that advice is because I believe it'll go away soon. Soon you will be able to have your family friend in your house like normal, because you know, it wouldn't be acceptable to me to put that distance between you and your loved ones, you know, you and your friends. It's only temporary. And so if there is someone that you really would like to see who isn't able to maintain social distancing, I would stick to phone calls and Zoom just temporarily until we get through this. Communicating with service providers. Individuals who have disabilities often rely on supports and services to maintain their independence. If you have a personal care attendant, have you communicated your health and safety needs with your personal care attendant or to the service that provides your PCA? What steps have they taken to prevent the spread of COVID-19? If you use electricity-dependent equipment, have you notified your power provider? So this is a twofold question, but many people, even those without, don't consider themselves individuals with disabilities. You know, people who have glasses like myself, you know, we rely on that support, and that's your glasses. Without it, you aren't able to see, and therefore you suddenly have now a need. So, you know, we talk about this as individuals who have disabilities, but this is really everyone, you know. If you trip and fall, you suddenly sprained your leg and now you have a mobility issue. So I would like to have everyone, whether you have a disability or not, consider those supports and services that allow you to function. And one important one for many people is a personal care attendant. And you can't always guess who has one. You know, myself, I have my family as personal care attendants, and you know, most days I don't actually need a lot of support, but I will have a flare-up where I suddenly need support to get out of bed and suddenly need support to cook my meals. And so these family members are there for me. A lot of people have services like Ability 360 in Phoenix has a personal care attendant service. And then you would want to make sure that the service provider is aware of precautions they should be taking to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Since this is such a big national emergency, I would be inclined to think they have taken precautions, but it's really up to you to make sure of that. The only one who's really the most at risk is yourself, and the only one you can only be accountable to yourself. So I would make sure that regardless of how reputable your service provider is, have that conversation with them in advance. Find out how they are preventing the spread. If you have an attendant who sees you but then sees someone else that day, what are they doing to mitigate those chances of spreading the disease? Are they, using gloves and taking those gloves off and using a different set for the next person? Simple things like that. If you use electricity dependent equipment, have you notified your power provider? So for me, I mentioned how I have a nerve stimulator implant. This needs electricity. So if I was to have a power outage for a significant period of time, I would then have an issue with not having this device be charged. There are people who use things like power chairs. It takes a significant amount of charging for those, and would be quite impacted if suddenly the battery was to run out. And there are wide amount of medical devices that I don't even know all of them. Technology is amazing. And the APS and SRP both have alert notification systems. So places that you can sign up and allow them to know that you have medical equipment requiring electricity. This will give you some protection if there is a power outage. They are able to contact you and let you know about places to charge, get first responders to you if needed. So it's not something I would want you to rely on, but it is an extra that you can do to protect yourself. Okay, what should be included in your emergency preparedness supplies? First aid supplies, food and water, and important documents. So you'll see online lots of checklists for your emergency preparedness supplies. Love them, read them, they're great. I picked these three as the most important. To step back for a moment, when I'm doing emergency preparedness for my own life, I look at it as a skill. It is like financial management. I'm balancing my checkbook, and I wouldn't just balance my checkbook once, right? It's something I repeat and come back to. So I will build these supplies, say today, when I have something like a class that alerts my attention to it, but then I will also check, maybe put in a calendar in a month, and maybe 6 months after that. What more supplies can you add? Do you need to rotate any of your supplies? So it's really a skill that you add to your lifestyle rather than something you do once and stop. So for first aid supplies, this is from Band-Aids to N95 masks. It includes durable medical equipment and extra supplies of your medicine. So I went and checked the price range of first aid kits, and they are something from $10 to $30. If you are in a limited income, I don't recommend buying a first aid kit. Just because there are a lot of things in there that you might not need as a high priority. So for me, in my emergency kit, I was probably one of the few people who had a supply of N95 masks as part of my kit, and I didn't have any Band-Aids. I can tell you I regretted this because eventually I cut my finger and couldn't find a Band-Aid. So definitely consider the big things and the small things, but prioritize that. Get the things that are most important and most critical first. So for me, as you heard about my medication, I obviously need that right away. So that is a huge priority for me. But if you have equipment that needs batteries, let's say, suddenly you need to make sure that batteries are part of this first aid supplies because that is charging your medical equipment. Okay, food and water. 2 weeks worth of food and water is recommended. 1 gallon of water per person and include service animals and pets. You will commonly still see 3 days It used to be recommended 3 days, and they've several government officials and paperwork have also said 2 weeks. So it's a little confusing out there whether FEMA's recommendation is 3 days or 2 weeks. I think after COVID-19, we're all aware that this is 2 weeks. We need to have more supplies than 3 days worth. However, it is a barrier for people who might not be, if you're sharing a room, if you are not in a permanent location, you might not be able to suddenly bring in 2 weeks worth of food into, your grandparents' basement. if your circumstances do not fit that, adjust to your circumstances. If you can't buy 2 weeks worth of food in one grocery trip, don't feel like you can't do emergency preparedness. Grab that 1 can of soup. You got to start somewhere. And if you're grabbing just 1 extra bottle of water, 1 extra can of food, you are doing emergency preparedness. So start where you are and don't feel like you need to start at the 2 weeks. There are people who have 6 months of food supplies, and that's fantastic. I wouldn't discourage any of you from doing that. Just don't feel like that's where you need to be at to be prepared. We have someone mention, which is a great item, something to put in your emergency checklist is a portable phone charger. Absolutely. I have like an extra battery pack that hooks up to my phone. Very useful. Phone is just your connection to so many things. It's not just even calling your loved ones to make sure you're okay, but it could be your GPS to get to a shelter. It could be access to your bank accounts. So considering an extra cell phone charger, the extra cord, an extra battery pack, those are great. Then important documents. Store important documents in multiple places. This includes extra copies on paper, flash drives, and in cloud storage. This can be, proof of insurance. This can be your marriage license. People who are immigrants to this country, I would say all your immigration paperwork is very important. So whatever in your life that is critical, put those important documents somewhere safe. If you are unfamiliar with technology and don't want to use a flash drive or thumb drive or cloud storage, simply make extra copies and give those to someone you trust. If your parents live near you, have your important documents with them. Just an extra copy in case there's an emergency. Okay, where to find more resources. We have in Arizona a COVID-19 hotline. So I presented that here. I have sent these slides to hopefully everyone who's registered, but I see that there's a few more participants. So I will check the email addresses afterwards to make sure you all have received the slides. There is also a phone number for the Arizona Center of Disability Law. This is a great resource, and if you ever feel like your rights have been violated, these are the people you should contact. There's also the number for National Domestic Violence Hotline and National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Both the stress of potentially getting sick with COVID-19 now, that's a huge stressor, and then the stress of the social distancing that in public health, we really anticipate numbers of domestic violence and suicide going up because of these stressors. And really, we would like to advocate if you do have any issues in your life that might be benefited from this hotline, give it a try, see what kind of other resources they have for you. There's no reason to stay in those situations that you're getting hurt. So, websites. Administration for Community Living, Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Arizona Department of Health Services, Arizona Together, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, National Alliance on Mental Illness, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and WebMD. The Arizona Together was created by our state government and that was just because COVID-19. This is a great resource for anyone who's maybe having financial trouble as a result of COVID-19, who needs access to Meals on Wheels. They have those links to those resources on the Arizona Together website. The Center for Disease Control website, I would recommend for everyone just to spend some browse time on there. They have an incredible amount of resources that it's a little overwhelming. You might want to go it on a couple times because they'll have resources that are meant for you as an individual and resources meant for healthcare providers, for service providers, for a lot of different people, teachers. So I would just spend some time on the CDC website and see what kind of emergency preparedness items they have and advice for you. I was able to find on there instructions about hand washing, instructions about disinfecting. So really any additional questions you have is probably on there. I really wanted to put the EPA on here. I know that stands out. It's because the EPA has created a list of chemicals that you can commonly buy over the counter that kill the coronavirus. So this includes just things like the Lysol wipes. There are many conditions, and I had a question about this before the event, that will cause reactions with certain chemicals. So Lysol that I get to take for granted, I'm using this like crazy at home, and they can't. You know, they have a severe health reaction to it. And so there is a 2-page long list of all the different over-the-counter things you can buy to use to disinfect. And so if you have any kind of reactions to these kind of cleaning products, I'd recommend getting that list and just finding some that work for you. It is unfortunately a hazard of these people with like multiple chemical sensitivities that are going to be going into buildings that are extra clean with these chemicals, but then are now causing a barrier for you. We do not have good advice yet about like one cleaner that is causes less irritation to those people that's recommended. So there isn't something like, oh, everyone use this chemical and we won't cause any sensitivity issues for people. Therefore, if you find something like that, let us know because we will advocate for you. And that's what we're going into the last slide, second last slide. I just have contact information, the last one. So this is how to advocate during COVID-19. So we have systems advocacy and individual and group advocacy. And systems advocacy is like with the government, with business, and nonprofit. So things that are going on right now are like public comment requests. FEMA changes documents. CDC changes documents. Whenever they do this, they request public input. And so this is a great opportunity. If you have some time on your hands, you might have to read through a 73-page document of guidelines, but in those guidelines might be on page 20 information about what kind of disinfectants to use. And if you know that disinfectant that doesn't cause your reaction, we want to get that in that line. So your public input is actually really important because they listen to that. Another way to get involved is to join our emergency preparedness committee. And then we have this in Arizona through the Arizona Statewide Independent Living Council, but there are other organizations and national ones that also have emergency preparedness committees, councils, and I would suggest getting involved with one of them. Businesses have consumer surveys, online contact forums. They would love to hear from you about if they're doing good security measures for COVID-19 or if they're doing bad ones. My husband went to a game store and they had everyone wash their hands outside the store and then wear cloth masks inside the store. So we thanked them for what we thought was really good procedures. Nonprofits, volunteer and donation, they are in desperate need right now. If you have any of time for that, any of the nonprofits, you know, doesn't matter if it's the Animal Humane Society, the Meals on Wheels, kind of everybody is hurting right now. So anyone you feel passionate about, get engaged. individual and group. At home, you might be living with people who are not as vulnerable to COVID-19. My husband, as far as I know, is healthy, no underlying conditions, but he has to engage in more social distancing measures for my protection. So you might have to advocate within your home, people taking more preventative measures. At work, are there workplace accommodations for those who had COVID-19 or for those who are vulnerable for COVID-19? Have that dialogue with your employer if you feel comfortable. If you don't, I would suggest contacting your Center for Independent Living, and they will actually guide you about having those conversations with your employers. At school, what kind of accommodations are there at school? Childhood daycares, adult day centers for vulnerable individuals. And it's the same thing as with those businesses. Communicate with them about how they can better protect you. And then lastly, this is how you can contact us. We have a website, it's www.azsilk.org. My phone number is 602-262-2900, extension 3. And then the best way to contact me though is through email, and that's my name, Sarah, SARAANN @azsilk.org. So we're just a little bit over our meeting, so I want to call it there. And thank you guys so much for participating today. And you know, this is slightly new information because we've modified everything due to COVID-19. So if you have any recommendations about things that we should have covered more or covered less of, anything at all, I would love to hear it. Please email me. And thank you again for coming today. Stay safe, everyone, and have a great one. Thank you.